All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a discussion on these three topics. Number one, moving with anxiety. We have seen a lot of movement from the United Opposition camp, both jointly and single-handedly, where single members of the United Opposition co-principals are now making statements in church, making statements in Pan-African spaces, and they are jointly making statements in the book launch. Now, we ask ourselves that while they work together, this united ahead of the D-Day of announcing who will become the flag bearer. We detail to you whether on that D-date the ship will scatter away or the flock will hold together. On our second story, ladies and gentlemen, we focus in Ugunja, where now critics and tumbocrats, previous haters of Raila Odinga, are seen on top of vehicles wearing the ODM orange cape. The struggle to scramble and partition this land is now getting to a level of even making personal exchanges with the UDA cohort, saying they are more ODM than Kalonzo can ever be ODM. Then the third story, ladies and gentlemen, we cross the border. Museveni, who has now admitted after the release of Bob Njagi and his friend that these individuals were actually arrested by the Tanzanian forces and allegedly put in a fridge. We look at the East African community in responses to protests and demonstrations. I'm your host Ogola, and this is the Civic Lens. So let's start with our main story, ladies and gentlemen, how this cohort is moving with anxiety. Over the period of the week that has just ended, we saw different movements that are actually a lot in a span of 1 week coming from the United Opposition camp. And we're saying a lot because in previous weeks, you would see the United Opposition camp coming out at least once or twice in a week. But in the record week that we have seen in the past 1 week, the United Opposition have been very active. Just to trace one of the actions or some of the actions that they have displayed in the record past 1 week is the attendance of Kango Jaramogi, of course, by Kalonzo Musyoka, which we detailed over here. Kalonzo Musyoka later on attended a Pan-African event in Lukenya University that we will detail to you in a few. And then we saw Matiang'i attending a conference, or rather a church meeting of Pastor T in Limuru. We have seen Rigathi Gachagua holding a meeting with the young millennials and Gen Zs in the DCP party. So these have been single movements aimed at growing the support of the United Opposition jointly and the support of these particular parties in the grassroots, both ahead of the 27th November by-elections, but importantly ahead of the 2027 major elections. Now, as they do this these single meetings, as they reach out to their electorate single-handedly and via support ahead of the 27th election and ahead of the main election, one question keeps lingering. The day that the flag bearer of the United Opposition will be determined, will this ship still, move in one cohort, or will the flock be dispersed? And as we see right now, that you could categorically say that the United Opposition has most likely settled on a candidate, but the disquiet that settling on this candidate causes within the United Opposition is something that we cannot downplay. So let's look at both their single movements over the past 1 week and their joint movements over the past 1 week, and close with a detailed analysis on whether or not on the D-Day this ship will hold together or the flock will be dispersed. While speaking at the Limuru church, Matiang'i was just espousing the fact that there is no need for a politician to identify with a church if that politician will not live to the requirements and the cultures of that particular church. And so he was making it look so bad that you camouflage under a church coverage to get into a particular political position, and then once you get into that political position, you become a person whose actions goes against the doctrines of the church. Essentially, what Fred was saying was attacking the previous regime that also rode on the back of religion to get into power. And if you remember the 2022 elections, other than the Mamamboga and the Boda being the main focus in the hustler narrative, there was also the aspect of the church behind the hustler narrative. So perhaps Fred is using his opportunity within the church not really to campaign for himself, but to sensitize the church and to warn the electorate in a larger extent that do not vote for them as the United Opposition just because they are going to church, and do not vote to anyone else just because they are affiliated affiliating with a church, because then if you do not live to the doctrines requirements of that particular church, it is unfit politically to hide under a goat skin, you know, when you are an hyena actually walking with the herd. So that message goes down deep, because the United Opposition have since now divided their approach the approach of politicking. If you listen to Matiang'i, he's taking the technocratic approach and is also reminding the people the evils that happened in 2022, or the lies that the people were given in 2022 that led the country to the current situation where now the young people have number of times gone to the streets to reject the doctrines of this government. Then you look at the statements of Kalonzo. Sometimes back we detailed on the People's Mirror, which is an affiliate channel of our channel, our reporting channel actually, where we report these political occurrences as they happen. And in that channel, one time we detailed that the statements that were made by Kalonzo in the book launch of JB Muturi, you know, shouting Joey at the end of his speech, is something that we are going to see as a trend moving forward in the Kenyan political scene, where Kalonzo is going to use this particular approach and closeness to Raila Odinga to tap into the political orphanage that have been presumed to be belonging to Ruto this far. And this is going to do to diffuse the support that exists within the Raila backyard that can go to Ruto in a bid to have this support for himself and for the United Opposition. And even before our saliva dried on the ground, we saw the meeting that was being held at Lukenya. This was a Pan-African meeting that was attended by the 4th president of Gabon, the vice chancellor, the deputy vice chancellor, and the chancellor of Lukenya University. The founders of Lukenya University was also attended by PLO Lumumba, who is an official of Pan-Africanism in the entire continent. And the speech that Kalonzo made while attending this particular conference that happened on Sunday narrowed down in the spirit of Raila Odinga. If anything, you would say that the substance of Kalonzo's speech was a eulogy to Raila Odinga, and he said that even after death, your Raila spirit still keeps inspiring. Chanting Ria, Tialala, and Joey alike in this conference, that was not mistaken. It was not just a platform for Kalonzo to actually eulogize Baba, because that much he has done in both the confines in Kasarani, in Moi Stadium, and in Opoda Farm, where we detailed our episode here at the Civic Lens. He showed up with a delegation of over 500 people. But the essence of the statement that was being made in Lukenya was tapping back into that particular orphanage voter mass, and it was reminding the people, not just the ones that were sitting in Lukenya, but the nation at large, because he knew this was being covered, that he will walk in the spirit of Raila Odinga, and in doing that, the spirit of Raila Odinga keep inspiring him. While we detailed that episode at the People's Mirror, we said that the Joey chanting will become a new trajectory of Kalonzo's campaign, and this has been it. Kalonzo is now campaigning both as a member of the United Opposition, but with the ideology that he wants to tap a bigger voter mass than the United Opposition, and the target is Raila's backyard. Now, this is causing sleepless nights in the State House, the house in the hill, because Ida seems to be supporting Kalonzo, as we detailed in that previous episode, and Orengo seems to be supporting Kalonzo. So this trend of Kalonzo staging his speeches, both as a member of the United Opposition and as a national figure, and also as a friend of Raila Odinga, is a calculative move to form base that is heavier than the Eastern Bloc, and also tap into the Nyanza Bloc, so that when they come to the table on the 2026, when they'll be determining who will become the presidential flag bearer of the United Opposition, Kalonzo will have an advantage of numbers. Then let's look at JB Muturi. Muturi is focusing currently at the by-election that is to be held at Mbeere North. This is very important for him because the seat was previously held by a Democratic Party member, and now UDA has infiltrated that particular place with cash and with support from the main government. So Muturi is right now focused on the Mbeere North by-election to retain the glory of the Democratic Party one, and also to show that he is a co-principal of the United Opposition that has a grip of his own backyard. So while national politics is taking shape ahead of 2026 and 2027, Muturi has not really been involved in the major scene yet, until the determination will come out of this by-election that is now set for less than 18 days from today to occur in 24 stations across the nation. And then Eugene, of course, Eugene's also focus is been left to the Malava by-election, now that the United Opposition co-principals have agreed that they're going to front one candidate in all by-elections. It seems like principals who have candidates in this particular by-elections put their focus on this by-election primarily because the determination of this by-election is a test run to their political weight in their own backyard ahead of the major elections in 2027. So for Muturi and Eugene, you'd say that currently their focus is entirely on their by-elections, and they're doing that very intentionally because the outcome of that particular by-election will mean a lot to their own standing as co-principals within the united opposition. Of course, you cannot forget of highlighting the activities of Gachagua over the past 1 week, and for Rigiji, it is building the DCP party. This is doing in a very calculative manner, and the recent calculative thing that he did is that he waived all nomination fees for the youth, being the millennials and the Gen Zs, who are strong party members right now and would want to use the party ticket to become members of parliament, members of county assemblies, and members of senate in the major election come 2027. So individually, these members of the united opposition, of course, we have not seen Martha for quite some time in these particular public gatherings, but you'd see that individual members of the united opposition are consolidating their bases either for the by-elections of this month or for the main election come 2027. While they're doing this, keeps lingering the question of the existing anxiety in their hearts. Who will the united opposition rally behind? And if they decide to rally behind this individual, is it going to be a conclusive agreement to rally behind this individual, or is the ship going to scatter away? Now, we have seen Uhuru Kenyatta, and we tell in a previous episode, trying to quieten the infights from his own party, the Jubilee Party. And other than the Jubilee Party, the united opposition arrangement has not had any serious challenges of secret divisions other than the sound divisions that the Secretary General of the UDA party was making very evident. So he kept saying that if they do not give Matiang'i this ticket in 2027, then the Jubilee party will go alone. Now that Uhuru Kenyatta has put a stop to that particular sentiment making, we are looking at a united opposition as a collective base. And now with this particular statement being made by the party leader of Jubilee, we hope that then when the decision is made in 2026 for one of the 6 co-principals to become the flag bearer or the person that faces Ruto in the 2027 elections, then we hope not to see a division or one member bolting out to join the camp or to go on their own way, but we hope to see a united team that will rally their support and Kenyans against one cause of facing Ruto in the 2027 elections. Of course, you cannot downplay that these anxieties exist and they are being managed politically to survive until the D-Day, but we hope that when this particular decision is made, they show solidarity to the Kenyan people, that they can actually rally behind one individual and deliver a win to their supporters, and they do not actually divide in what we saw with Ford in the early 2002s when one presidential candidate actually led to a division of a party or a coalition to 3 different branches. So we keep our lenses here, the civic lens, at the things that develop with the unity of the united opposition to keep you updated up to the 27th of this month, but beyond up to the main elections in 2027. Now, our second story, ladies and gentlemen, focuses on a by-election of a particular area that have since really been not discussed extensively. Here, the civic lens, we have put before our lenses almost all by-elections. We have looked at Banisa constituency. You can find them here at our page. We have looked at Magarini constituency, we have looked at Kasipul constituency, we have looked at Baringo constituency, we have looked at Mbeere North constituency, all extensively, but we have never really given an extensive look to Ugunja constituency. Now, Ugunja constituency is facing a by-election right now because Honorable Opiyo Wandayi was given the position of CS of Energy as a result of the broad-based arrangement between the ODM and the UDA parties. Mr. Wandayi, while he joined government, joined fully and has even made statements post the death of Raila Odinga that he intends to remain in the broad-based government not only up to 2027 but beyond. Now, while these sentiments are being made by certain ODM factions, a large supporters of Raila Odinga find it very uncomfortable to stay in this arrangement. But Mbadi, Wandai, and other CS find this arrangement to be the only way forward for the broad-based government. Before we come back to Ugunja, Mbadi was quoted making statements in his backyard in vernacular, saying that this is the only government that has put in consideration the interest of the Luos. And he also said that the ODM party does not have a fit candidate in 2027. Let us not lie to ourselves. And so he said that the only way for the ODM party is to join Ruto post 2027 and front a candidate in 2032. Now, a lot of people might not be siding with Mbadi on this one, including Orengo, Ida, who actually have really made statements to veer towards Kalonzo. But beyond that particular clique, even the supporters of Raila Odinga really might not be comfortable rallying with the Ruto just like that in 2027. Now, there are these silent voices, and Ugunja is one such place where these silent voices are being heard. Remember, in Ugunja, there's a Wiper Democratic Party candidate. At the same time, there is a UGM candidate under Maraga's party. Then there is the ODM candidate. The ODM candidate was previously a manager of CDF funds in this particular region. He has worked with Wandai. In one angle, you can look at it this way. He will have the support of the party because he's close to Wandai, and most likely he will win. But in another angle, you look at it this way. He has worked with Wandai. He has been in the scenes that are associated with Wandai. And if Ugunja people perhaps needs a new breath, he will be ousted. Now, Wandai has had people like Honorable Aaron, who is Aaron Cheruiyot, who is the majority leader of the Senate. We have seen Ichungwa, also a member of National Assembly. These are individuals that have never been comfortable with ODM really. If anything, if you trace their legislative history, everything they've been saying and fighting for has been against ODM. But yesterday, we saw them on top of cars wearing the ODM colored orange cape, which ordinarily they would not wear if Raila Odinga was alive in that particular backyard. And now they are campaigning that Raila left ODM and ODM was left in broad-based. And so they are attacking Kalonzo, that Kalonzo should not feel so comfortable with this region because he's a friend of Baba. And Kalonzo should remember that the first votes Aaron Cheruiyot casted in 2007 was an ODM vote. You know, sometimes you listen to politicians campaign and you can see the folly in whatever they are saying, and you can actually really see the nonsense in whatever they are saying, but you have to keep quiet and listen to whatever they are saying because that's their approach of reaching to the electorates. Though someone whose mind who functions clearly remembers Aaron Cheruiyot's journey in politics and Kimani Ichung'wah's journey and knows very well that these individuals have not been comfortable working with ODM. But because Wandai, the Tumbocrat, really wants to maintain his position in CS and in the government of Ruto post 2027 and beyond, we are seeing instances of now these individuals being the people being used to campaign for ODM in Ugunja. Yet there are ODM members that can be used to campaign in Ugunja, like Mbadi himself, like Wandai himself, like Babu himself, like Sifuna himself, like even Wanga. There's a whole large team of ODM members that can go to Ugunja, campaign in Ugunja, and deliver an ODM win in Ugunja without any need of UDA government. Now, Mr. Wandai, after realizing that the ODM party really does not support his sentiments that boldly, has now resorted to his colleagues, Mr. Aaron Cheruiyot and Mr. Kimani Ichung'wah, to actually campaign for ODM in an ODM backyard, yet they are UDA agents. This just shows you how the scramble to take over Raila'S land is something that is so much. And when Kalonzo walked into that particular space in Opoda Farm and received that particular reception that was given by both Orengo and Ida, this bothered the house in the hill. And now UDA foot soldiers have been sent, just the way they were sent to Malava, have been sent to Ugunja to neutralize the masses in Ugunja, to remind them that Raila left them in ODM, and to remind them that ODM was left in broad-based government. These are very interesting by-election, and we hope to see how Ugunja people are going to vote, and Kasipul alike. Now that Raila is no longer there, and the people that are campaigning in Raila's backyard could be clearly seen to be campaigning for their own personal gains and not for the gains of the Kenyan politicians. So Ugunja is going to be a determinant race in this particular by-elections. If Opiyo Wandai wins it, good for the Opiyo Wandai high position in government, because really you won't say if ODM wins it, because Moses Omondi is much of a pure Wandais project than is an ODM project. But the statements that individual like Chris Budok had still also neutralized that win with the KANU party. Benson Obol, who is with Maraga's party, can also, neutralize that win. We have Orodio Odhiambo under the Wiper party ticket that now might find an advantage after Kalonzo received that warm reception in Opoda Farm. We have Jubilee's candidate Eric Ofiro. It seems like in Ugunja, the united oppositions are not agreeing to front one candidate, and all these candidates are taking it on against the ODM candidate. Ugunja has cleared 11 candidates so far, and they are all going against the ODM candidate, and this is going to be so much interesting scenes to watch come 27th of this month, this very year, on what will come out of Ugunja and of course Kasipul Kabondo. Now beyond that, because Kasipul Kabondo has since been divided to be Kasipul constituency and Kabondo constituency. Now beyond that, ladies and gentlemen, let's go across the border. Sometimes back we detailed an episode on Tanzania, giving an historic analysis on why the silent voices of Tanzania finally found a fresh space to communicate their disquiet and their disinterest with their government through the Gen Z revolutions. We did that episode shortly after the wave or the search engines on Tanzania had gone down, but you can still find it here at the Civic Lens. And today we just want to look at how the East African community, not entirely all the 6 countries or the 8 countries, but just the 3 primary countries of the East African community, being Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya, have perpetrated violence against human rights individuals. Of course, it's still live in your memory that sometime Agatha and Boniface Mwangi went to Tanzania, and that did not go well for them. They were arrested and humiliated in a very gross way from their testimonies. And shortly after, we saw Bob Njagi and his colleague going to Uganda to campaign for Bobi Wine. The same fate befell them, and it took Kenyans' intervention for quite some time, a period that is going to almost a month, to have them released back to the border. They have gotten back home safe and sound. And then we witnessed a Kenyan lawyer being arrested in Tanzania in the wake of Tanzanians' protests, and a Kenyan teacher being shot dead in Tanzania in those particular protests. So East Africa has become a hub of violation of human rights, really. And this has gotten to the level of so much involvement that people are now saying that the 3 presidents could be working together to ensure that silent voices or voices are silenced if they are raising political concerns. Now, Museveni has said publicly that they arrested Mr. Njagi and his colleague, and they detailed him for some time as a result of the Uganda intelligence. And the reason why they arrested these 2 individuals is because they were working with Bobi Wine's team, and they were experts in rioting. Now, while Kenyans were looking for these people and the Ugandan officials were saying that they do not know the whereabouts of these individuals, Museveni said nothing. But now that they have been released back to the Kenyans' border, Museveni has actually admitted that these individuals were under the custody of the Ugandan forces for some time and has now been released back home. Now, with this confession, perhaps we are going to see a trajectory in the East Africa arrangement where Suluhu Hassan could also perhaps admit the atrocities that were done in Tanzania and to the exact number without actually saving face internationally. We also hope President Ruto to admit also if there has been any abductions under his government to the exact number, knowing very well that when Justin Muturi's son was actually abducted, he was released 2 hours later after having a communication with President Ruto. This is an information that we now found during the book launch of Justin Muturi. So it's true that the East African space has been very, very hostile for human rights activists in the previous past. And we hope as a region that moving forward, this becomes something that ends completely, not just taking responsibility upon release of individuals, but something that both or all the 3 countries can come together and say that in the East Africa bloc, human rights issues can now thrive without being affected with the government directly. So that is just coming shortly after. More details are coming from Tanzania, really, on the atrocities that went on without the media being given permission to actually cover power, and there are still silent voices in Kenya on, compensation of victims that were actually killed, others were disappeared during the protests that have since not been done. At some time back, there was a committee that was being formed to address these issues, but even that committee has since, gone down the drain without anyone talking about it or reviving it. So at the last part, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just talking about what is going on beyond the border and what really we should hope to go on beyond the border moving forward. But our main recap here at the Civic Lens today was the movement with anxiety in the united opposition ahead of the day when they're going to determine who becomes the flag bearer. We have seen hypocrisy in Ugunja, where haters of Raila Odinga are now in tops of cars wearing the same color of his party and chanting closeness to him, compared to even his very close friends who have put aside their interest politically to support him thrice. And of course, we are closing this episode, ladies and gentlemen, with that NB on what is going on across the border, asking the border presidents of the 3 East Africa countries to stop human rights violations. This is the Civic Lens.